4th of July 2024. In this news flash, I want to talk about Floyd Shivambu and statements that he made about China in the big debate. Now, I find it almost hilarious that the EFF top echelon and some ANC cadres very quickly refers to China. And then they focus on the Central Committee and they say China is communist. Okay. Now, yes, the Central Committee is in control of the Chinese Communist Party, but the reality is, on economic level, the Chinese abandoned the communism story 30 years ago. And they realized that they cannot allow free economic activity like in America, because there's an inherent danger in that huge corporations can eventually control the state. And that is exactly what the fuck has happened now in the West. These big corporations, they are the guys that are actually governing the countries. The politicians are their stooges. So China realized that that's a danger. And lo and behold, they looked to the south and saw South Africa. And they realized that the mixed economy of the National Party, that is the right thing to do. Strong SOEs that allows on-ramps for private sector, with the SOEs controlling the core functions of the country. Exactly like what happened here in South Africa. And they replicated it there. Don't you find it ironic that South Africa, the Boere, we had the right idea? Okay. So the Chinese implemented that. And today, around about 61% of economic activity in China is in the hands of SOEs. And then there's a percentage of joint ventures, and then there's a percentage, the remainder is private sector. And that is how the Chinese controls their economy. Now to Floyd, I've got news. You fuckers were so clever to fuck the Boer system. You destroyed the SOEs, and that was the beginning of your end. And as the SOEs tumbled, other economic activities went down the drain, because these SOEs formed the backbone of the economy. But with your natural intelligence, you thought it was a clever plan to fuck those things up. But all you have in your mind is the CCP Central Committee in China. Now here's another piece of information for you. On that Central Committee in China, there's not a single person sitting there that is not academically qualified. And if I say academic qualification, I don't mean a fucking tree climbing degree. Those guys has got engineering degrees, commercial degrees, scientific degrees, highly qualified people. And here's another little tidbit for Floyd. The Chinese execute corrupt officials. They execute them. Now just look around yourself and imagine how many of you would have survived if you were in China. But I'll leave that to your imagination. Now, what nobody talks about is that next level of government in China. And that level is the people that has been elected by the communities to go and represent their case to the CCP. And here's another interesting tidbit for you guys that don't understand or don't want to understand China. It is by law in China and by CCP decree that every town or rural community that sends a representative to that board. Every cultural group must, in that specific, let's call it constituency, must have a representative. Every cultural group must have a representative. So that thing is growing annually. And those are the people that tells the CCP what they need in their communities. And then the CCP implements those things or execute those things. I've listened to a teacher specifically that told her story, and she's now for 15 years one of those representatives. And she said in the 15 years she has taken 17 proposals to the CCP. The CCP implemented 15 of those proposals in the education system. And 2 of them, they said, these 2, we will not only implement it for the education system, this is something that must be implemented across the board, all the disciplines. So, don't have this fucking idea in your head that the CCP is like the old Politburo, where they can do what they like and whatever, and nobody can question them. That's not like that. But I have now mentioned this lady and the education system. Here's something. One night, I used to be a group member of one of these black think tanks, and then they were talking about exactly this type of shit that night. And they also had a bright spark there that had a lot to say about education and so forth, and about China. Here's the facts. The Chinese government invested billions in education because they realized that they cannot pull their nation out of poverty if they don't have educated, qualified workforce. So they invested heavily in their education system. Grade 3 in our language, grade 3s are doing mathematics in China that grade 12s in South Africa will not pass. That's the one thing. The other thing is the Chinese are extremely focused on scientific and engineering qualifications. The Chinese universities deliver per year more scientists and engineers than the rest of the world together. That is why China is growing as it is growing. Contrary to Floyd's fucking stories here in South Africa of burning schools down and decolonizing education and making the pass rate 30% and all that cuck. Plus, very few students in China on university level studies this humanity courses. I call them tree climbing courses. They don't do that. There's very few of them that studies that. So there's a major difference that Floyd needs to take into consideration, and all these EFF blabbermouths and all these keyboard warriors must take note of that, because that's a fact. The Chinese investment in education is enormous. And then here comes the big thing. Go and look at the Chinese students. Extremely disciplined. Extremely disciplined. There's not a single incident of Chinese students burning down a university or burning down a school or fucking a road up or burning a bus. It does not happen. If they should try that, and now you must understand, the Chinese, they are allowed to protest. But if they break and destroy shit, they meet the full might of the law. Actually, it seems to me in many cases, first the full might of the security forces, and then if they survive the law. So it doesn't happen there. So the big difference between South Africa and China, for Floyd to take note of. First of all, the Chinese SOEs are run by super qualified people. And that SOEs is managed to the best of their ability because they know their whole economy depends on those SOEs. And the SOEs, their primary task is to keep the Chinese government system out of the hands of corporations. And they did it very effectively. Putin is doing the same thing in Russia. So, that is something that Floyd must take into consideration. The next thing that he must take into consideration is education. Education. A 30% pass is fucking useless. Means nothing. The guy comes out of matric and he can't do basic mathematics. What the fuck must the economy do with him? He is unemployable. Unemployable. And then, very important, discipline. You, Floyd Shivambu, cannot survive in China because the discipline will destroy you. So, don't come with your bird brain frame of reference and refer to China when we talk about South Africa. We had what China has today. You destroyed it. And the other thing that you have to get into your mind, you EFF robots and drones and keyboard warriors, you must understand, without a disciplined, educated workforce, the economy will go nowhere. And finally, get it into your head. Russia abandoned communism. China abandoned communism. Where the fuck do you think you come out and trying to convince the people that you can make communism work? The Chinese and the Russians were too stupid, in your view. You live in La La Land, but reality is going to eat you up. Please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. Thank you for your support.